Hey everybody, and welcome to the next video for the project Build a Data Analysis Library from Scratch in Python. In this video, we're going to be completing step 5, return columns as a list. Okay, so we're right here in step 5, and what we want to do in this step is make the columns attribute return a list. So whenever anyone accesses columns as an attribute, such as df.columns, we would like a list to be returned. So let's go ahead and see how that looks like in the final product. So we're back over here in the Jupyter Notebook. So we already have Pandas Cub already loaded. So if we do df final dot columns, we're going to get a list of the column names in order. Now, this is exactly the same functionality as Pandas. Pandas has its own separate object for this, not a list, but it essentially works identically. Now, you'll notice that this is not a method, so columns is not a method. There's nothing to execute. You do not end the line of code with parentheses. There's no parentheses attached to columns. It's simply an attribute access, and it'll return a list. So in order to implement this, we're actually going to define columns as if it were a method. So it's going to look just like any other method, except it's going to be decorated by the by property, which is this is built into Python itself. So I'm not going to spend time in this tutorial talking about decorators, or in this particular case, the property decorator. There are other tutorials that will cover that. All I'm going to say about it is that it will basically transform something that looks like a method into an attribute. So we'll be able to execute all the code under here without actually, putting parentheses at the end of columns. So it essentially turns this thing that looks like a method into an attribute. So that's what the property decorator does. It does quite a few more things, and we'll see one of the other things it does in the very next method. So basically, whenever someone calls df.columns, it will throw us into this method right here, and it will execute all the code over here. So let's go ahead and simply just return the columns as a list. So the column names are now stored in the underscore data dictionary, right? The underscore data holds all the column names as the keys in that dictionary. So all we have to do is just say simply return it. We want to return it as a list, and we're just going to force our dictionary to be a list. Now you might wonder, well, our dictionary is composed of keys and values. Why will this only return the keys? Well, that's just the way. So the way Python created dictionaries was that if you iterate through them one by one, you don't get the keys and the values, you only get the keys. So when you pass this into list like this, it will turn, whenever you pass a dictionary into list, it will simply iterate through only the keys, and it will force the keys to be a list. It will not look at the values whatsoever. You have to call .items or .values in order to retrieve the values of a dictionary. So it's as simple as this. Self._data is a dictionary. List will just simply iterate through all those keys in the dictionary and force them to be a list. Now, one other minor note here is that the order in our data frame does indeed matter. So dictionaries used to be inherently unordered, and they're not. They're still not. Before Python 3.6, they were inherently unordered. In Python 3.6, internally they became ordered. So whatever you entered into your dictionary first is how it would be retrieved whenever you iterated through it. And so we're going to use this property, this underlying orderliness of our dictionaries to our advantage. Otherwise, we would have to use something like an ordered dict from the collections module in order to store our data. But now that the dictionaries have ordered, have this orderliness to them, we do not have to do that anymore. So whenever the user passes us a data dictionary, we're going to assume that is the order that they want the columns is, and that's the order that we're going to preserve. And Python does this for us automatically without having to get an order dict anymore. So this should work, and let's go ahead and see if it passes this test_columns test. So, and it does pass. So we just implemented it with just a very small amount of characters. Let's go back into our notebook over here and just test it directly over here, and we can see that now we match Pandas. Our Pandas Cub is now matching the Pandas Cub final. Okay, so that does it for this one, for step 5, and we're going to go on to step 6 next.